Okay, there we go.
All right, welcome back. I realized that I neglected something really important at the beginning, so I'm hoping people are still paying attention, have been with us for the last 3 hours, are paying attention. But I need to apologize. I forgot to recognize our representatives who are participating mostly via Facebook Live from our association groups. Really value their participating in our meetings by watching and representing their groups. And so that's from Child Nutrition, we have B. Alonzo, we have Dallin Miller from SLASA, James Tobler from SLEA, Cindy Mills is representing SLEOPA, and she's very dedicated to be watching our meetings and paying attention and representing that group. Eric Adams represents Buildings and Grounds, and Ben Rowley Transportation. And apologize to all of them for not mentioning them sooner. That was my bad, but really do appreciate the work that they do and representing their groups. So that's on the record now. At least I'm grateful to them, and sorry for my neglect. We only have a couple items left, but they're big and important. We've talked through a lot of things today and given a lot of feedback, received a lot of information, made some important decisions. I'm really happy with where we're headed. But the purpose of this meeting in the summer meeting is typically as a planning meeting for the upcoming year. What's a little bit different about this year is that everything's different, right? We have a lot. We've talked about a lot of it, knowing that we'll be working through reopening school, needing to be nimble, flexible with how things go with the virus. We have an interim superintendent in Larry, and we're grateful to him. But we've got a lot on our plates this year. But that doesn't mean that we don't have important priorities that board members want to talk about. And typically we've used this meeting to set priorities, to have a conversation about what our priorities are, and to talk about how we'd like to populate agendas next year, what issues we'd like to tackle. And so that's what the purpose of this discussion item is about. I asked you all to think about your top 3 priorities, recognizing that we have a lot on our plate. And we started this meeting with professional development, the meeting today with some professional development, where we reviewed our vision and mission statement. And now is a good time for us to look at what our board priorities are and the goals that we've set. And you're familiar with what those are. We've talked about them a lot. We set at a board planning meeting. I want to say it was 3 years ago now, maybe it was 4 even. One of you who's been around as long as I have will remember that. And those board priorities are literacy and social and emotional learning. And we've geared a lot of our board conversation over the last several years on those topics. I think it's served a good purpose to unifying us around those board goals. So I'd just like to open the conversation for discussion to begin with on those board priorities and how you feel about those. Like I said, it's been a couple of years. So do we want to reaffirm our commitment to those board goals? Is there something you'd like to add to that perhaps? Or let's just open for conversation. I don't want to steer it too much because I want to hear what you're thinking about those board goals. Sam? Oh, go ahead, Nate.
I'll defer to Sam. He wants to go.
No, go ahead, Nate. That's okay.
Okay. No, I appreciate the setting the stage for that, Melissa. And I personally feel like literacy and SEL should obviously still be priorities for us. I think just in trying to think about the priorities that I wanted to present, one, just a thank you to the board because, the superintendent search and process timeline RFP search firm was one of my goals and priorities for this year. So We already tackled the first piece of that today, so thank you for that. But just trying to think of things in the context of our community and our world, especially with, social justice movements that are taking place around the country. I would really like to suggest to this board that we add a third priority to our work as a board in a district, and that is really moving that vision statement of excellence and equity to a priority, one that can be measured. Again, that would be a very, a much larger discussion about, what equity means, how we define it, how we want to measure equitable outcomes in our district. If it's student achievement, I think that should be a piece of it. If it's best practices or outreach to the community, I really feel like that we should capture the moment and the momentum of our world and really, dial in and move that excellence and equity to a priority that we can measure moving forward. So just relative to the priorities that we have, I would love for us to look at that in a different way. Secondary to that, with SEL, would love to kind of figure out, how we enhance that work, and if it is something that we can measure. I know the team that's working on that is very committed to that. So I just love to collaborate with them on SEL and how we measure for success and student outcomes with that. And then, of course, my third suggestion would be, how do we move equity up to a board and district level priority that really identifies how that impacts students.
So I hear you kind of saying two things: equity is a board priority, and revisiting our social and emotional board priority in terms of measurement and what the work that, so maybe a report from that group on how they're measuring success in that social and emotional framework.
Yes, I think so. And then in figuring out with this board and appropriate district personnel from Ed Equity about how we measure equity. And I know that they've put out a lot of really great updates to us in the most recent meetings that we've had. Would really just like to pick up where we left the conversation off last time and figure out how we measure for success in that realm as well.
Okay. Thanks, Nate. So, Sam?
I like what Nate said about adding equity as a goal and elevating that to one of our 3 board goals. I think they're good goals, the 3 goals or the 2 goals that we have. I think the bigger question is, how do we measure them? And particularly social and emotional learning, I feel like gets deployed a lot as a catch-all. And I don't always know what people are really talking about. I mean, I'm not saying I don't believe in it, and I think there's a lot of great work that's gone into that in the district, but I think for each of them we could hone in a little bit more on, like Nate said, how we're measuring them. And I think that work is going on the literacy front. We just need to maybe pay a little bit more attention to it as a board.
Okay. Do you want to add the things that you've been thinking about in terms of priorities for next year while we're here with you, this conversation?
Well, sure. And I've talked to many of you about this individually. There's this balancing act between what I can work on with you all in the next few months and the fact that we have to be mostly working on COVID-19 and the superintendent search, which I think we've kind of all alluded to, that being those 2 things being among our few things that we can really focus on. But I do think, like Nate said, this is a unique moment, and I think we'd be missing an opportunity not to look both within from an equity lens, and I don't know, that could be several different things, but I sort of put under the looking within column equity audits, which we've talked about, reviewing our hiring practices, which many people have talked to me about, how we can work towards a teaching force that reflects the racial diversity of our students, and how we can listen better to the teachers that we do have who are really fantastic. And many of whom are doing like doctoral research that they're finishing up this year. I was going to pose the idea that obviously we don't have time to hear from every teacher in a board meeting, but I know a few employees, some of whom are teachers and some of whom are administrators, who are finishing up doctoral theses. And I thought it might be fun for us to kind of set up a structure where if they wanted to present some of that research to us, especially if it's research that's specific to the district, that they could either apply or just let us know. And depending on how many people are interested in doing that, we could, hear from some of those people. I know
that's an interesting idea. I like that.
I was thinking of Stacy Briggs and also Mohsen Ghaffari, who's on the SLEA board, or the two that I was thinking of, but I'm sure there are others. So I had that under kind of looking internally. And then the other part of that, kind of harnessing the moment thing that Nate's talking about, I think has to do with looking externally to our relationship with the larger community. And I think one good way to look at that is just looking at all the ways in which we relate to the city, right? And so there's obviously going to be a need to have the police conversation, to talk about our relationship with the police. But I think it's that, and it's a bunch of other things too that we're maybe not thinking about. I heard a sad story about one of our crossing guards, who was panhandling at a grocery store, and a bunch of parents at this school struck up a collection to help him through this period when he's not working. And I just think that there are so many ways we could work more effectively with the city, to serve that excellence and equity mission. And we should kind of maybe do an audit of our relationship with the city and all of those many facets. We do give them a ton of money every year out of our property tax budget, and I just think we should have a more active role in how some of that money is spent. So that's what I have as my second priority, is kind of looking out to the larger community. And then my third thing is just kind of like, what are the 2 or 3 things we need to do in terms of planning ahead? And like I said, I'm going to have a limited role in that, but I want to be a part of those discussions while I'm here. And we've made some big commitments in the last year in terms of changing our schedule, and in terms of our sustainability resolution that we just passed. And obviously there's a need to kind of plan for sustainable enrollment at many of our schools and how the housing market's going to change. And a lot of that we just can't know, but we can be asking the right people and consulting the experts that we think can help us plan for those things. Those are my 3 things, I guess. Kind of looking internally with an equity lens, looking externally at our relationship with the city, also with an equity lens, and then just kind of like, what are the big 2 or 3 things we need to be planning for the next board that's going to be working with the superintendent that this RFP process ends up hiring.
Thanks, Sam. Those are 3 pretty big things. So I'm hearing with the planning ahead kind of also, it's could be pretty inclusive, but I heard you talk about enrollment trends and housing. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And part of the city, anything more specific than with the city, also an SRO police conversation.
I'm open to all of those conversations. You could certainly accuse me of trying to cram in more than 3 things under these 3 headings.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm accusing you of.
And you probably should, but I guess what I'm trying to say
Sneaky.
is, you know, any of those things could be great opportunities for us to serve students better by making them feel safer, or just digging up more money, or fulfilling our responsibility as elected officials to make sure that the money that's going out is actually working for our most vulnerable students and not kind of against their needs. So whatever part of that conversation the rest of you want to have is what I want to try to engage with. I mean, I all those things are important, but I think the question is what's the appetite? Where is our appetite to work on those things collectively? So
Okay. Sam, I like how you think. Thank you.
thanks.
Michelle?
So I have, and I kind of want to piggyback a little bit off of what Sam was saying about the districts of just with the district and the police force and stuff. I think that could go under social and emotional learning, where we could maybe use a lot of that funding instead for more, health, like mental health workers, counselors, things like that in the school system. I think my biggest umbrella that I'm kind of looking at is definitely through the diversity and equity lens. So 3 of the things that I was thinking about was the superintendent search, being very mindful of the consultants that we hire to make sure that we have a really good broad scope of candidates to look at. So hopefully that will come about. The other one would be under, again, I think I think we all kind of have similar minds, but the hiring practices, but also adding under that training and mentorship. So a lot of some really good diversity trainings for teachers, how to teach diverse students, that kind of thing. And then again, the mentorship, I know that was a conversation with some of the administrators talking about having stronger mentorship programs so that they could, either they themselves move up or they could look at other teachers and say, hey, you know what? I think you would make a really great administrator. Let's mentor you, if that's what they wanted to do. So kind of giving them that opportunity to step up if they wanted to. And then my final piece would actually fall under both literacy and social and emotional learning, and that's more of a cultural learning. So a cultural learning framework within the curriculum. I'm like Nate and Sam. I'm not sure how social and emotional learning is being measured, or how, I don't know how that's measured, but literacy definitely you can measure, but adding a lot more cultural curriculum. And there's a really great book that I've been reading that one of our principals actually gave me the title of, and it's really amazing to look at how teachers can learn how to be more culturally responsive within their curriculum, and to like broaden that scope of, and having students read a lot of different things that cover a lot of different diverse folks, right? And that you can actually measure that, because it also talks about how the brain works, and the science behind that. And so you could definitely do that with a lot of the literacy testing that they do. So you can do a pre-test at the beginning of the year. You can have all these like really great, reading curriculum, and that can be across a lot of the different content areas. So it doesn't have to be just language arts. It can be in history, it can be in science, it can be in math. And then you come up at the tail end of the year and you do more testing and you see how they grew. And I think that you'll see a lot of positive growth there. So those are my maybe 3-ish things.
Yeah, I know I do know you all at this point pretty well. I knew it was going to be hard to narrow it to 3, but they're great things. I mean, I love the way you guys think. I would love you to share the name of the book that you're reading. So share that with us.
Let me grab that real quick. Okay. It's called Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain. And the author is Zaretta Hammond.
Zaretta Hammond. I love that.
So really, I'm like halfway through, and it's just been a lot of great information.
I love your summer reading.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
It's mixed. Got fiction, I got nonfiction.
I love it. Okay, so I hear you kind of talking about hiring practices, the superintendent search, making sure we have a broad scope of candidates, a diverse candidate pool, looking at mental health workers, social workers in conjunction with SROs, kind of under an SEL framework and a cultural learning framework, kind of within our curriculum, and how that might be measured in terms of student outcomes as we are looking specifically at culturally responsive teaching and learning. Does that capture it? Okay. All right, Mike, Mike, Catherine, Christy, whoever gets their hand up first. Mike, go ahead.
Let me just talk a little bit about literacy. You guys know I've been complaining for the last 3.5 years about the reading scores of our kids are coming out of the 3rd grade. So what I did is I went back and did a little research, and I tried to determine why that was happening. So I went back about 13 years, and I'll tell you why I went back 13 years, and I pulled the scores of our 3rd graders. And then I pulled our scores of our 3rd graders in 2019. This might be something for the superintendent to think about when we talk, but I pulled them out. And do you know that the scores in 2007 were higher than in 2019? Because every school, every elementary school has gone down. Not one of them went up in scores. Not one. And so I pulled them out. Some of them even half, 50% less. And so I tried to figure out why that was happening. And in 2007, you know what we started teaching with? Story time. We're teaching with now wonders. Basils are not doing it. We need to have our teachers have some kind of a latitude where they can use some of their own ideas and strategies that they've learned in colleges and universities, so they might be able to reach some of these kids. Basils aren't doing it. I just couldn't figure out why that was the problem, but that's it.
So literacy is where your focus would be, and kind of looking at our curriculum. I would also say, Mike, it's probably important to look at what test was being used for that end of level score you're looking at. I suspect it was a different test, which comes up with different numbers. So that's maybe something to look at too. But I hear what you're saying. I think I hear a focus on literacy with a real lens of the curriculum, right? And how we're looking at literacy in terms of the way it's being taught. No, I think that's important. And that's one of our priorities. Do you have something else you want to talk about in terms of priority?
Nope,
that's it. Okay.
I'm interested in that right now.
Well, that's good. That's you made up for Michelle and Sam. They each have 4. You did 1, and now we're on track. I love it. Thanks, Mike. Go ahead, Christy.
So I've just been marking things off of my list so I don't duplicate. I had a lot of the similar things, when you talk about the district goals around literacy and SEL, and you look at the different lenses that we need to be looking through in regards to excellence and equity. I think that it's important to pair that together. So I appreciated Nate saying that. I think that that has to go hand in hand. So I think listening to some of the conversation that we've been having, my thought process, one of the things I wrote down was about critical conversations, relevant and critical conversations. And so everything that we've talked about, whether it's about the cultural framework or an equity lens or looking at the external, internal, I would like to see us, put those into study sessions, so that we can talk about, what we're doing right now, even have a look back at what we did do so that we can see if there was progress, looking at what we're doing now, and then what can be the steps going forward. And for me, when you look at whether it's, the talking about social justice or SROs, but I also think that we need to continue to focus in on our most at-risk students, which are kids who live in poverty, intergenerational poverty. We haven't had, that was a part of our SEL, but we just haven't dug into it the way that we had hoped that we would. So I think that if there was a way for us to put together a study session each time we met, talk about those critical conversations, bring our employees together and have a look at what we're doing now and what we can change going forward, with our practices, and how can we make them best practices, that would be beneficial to our students and to our employees and to our community. I think that it's really important that we focus in on our community in this too. So that would be one.
So can I ask you a clarifying question? So you're asking for studies, kind of saying study sessions.
So study sessions around those critical conversations that everyone's been talking about, that we line them up and we say, if we're going to talk about equity, over a couple of months, what is it that we want to talk about equity and excellence? And how does, cultural framework work into that? How does the internal and external, work into that? And how does that fit with SEL? I just want us to be more thoughtful about how we have those conversations in regards to coming up with action steps, because we can talk all we want and have, really great ideas, but unless they really come out to be some sort of an action step, then it's just us talking. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I was understanding what topics you were wanting for the study session.
I would say everything that everyone's been talking about is exactly what should be couched under those critical and relevant conversations. So however we want to put that together.
And then you would add
sessions.
Poverty and intergenerational poverty. You would add to that.
Definitely something that we wanted to have as a part of the conversation around SEL. And we just never really quite, there's a lot to be talking about when we talk about SEL. So,
right.
I want to touch on something that Sam actually brought up earlier, and it's been on my list, and that's our advocacy role. I think that, we are a part of a group, obviously, with Utah School Boards Association, with their Joint Legislative Committee. But I also think that we have come to find out, especially over the last decade, that Salt Lake District, unless we have really strong relationships with our city, that we can be caught off guard and we can become a target. So I want us to think about that advocacy role and what that looks like. How can we be more engaged? And I don't think that we necessarily always have to be out of step with everyone else, but I do think that there are issues that we have in Salt Lake City that very few other municipalities have. And so I would like to see us really look at an advocacy role that is much, I don't want to say much more engaged, because I think we're engaged, but I think that there's some, well, I do want to say much more engaged. So, I think that it's important that we have a really strong sense of who we are. And part of the reason I'm saying that is because, and Melissa, this, and so does Catherine and Sam this year, that Salt Lake is discounted because we have Democrats. in the state legislature. And so it's as though we don't have a voice, up there because we have mostly Democrats that represent us. But yet we are one of the biggest contributors to equalization. And, if we're not going to stand up for our city, then shame on us. So I would like us to really have a conversation about our advocacy role. The last one that I want to bring up is, and it's going to kind of dovetail into what a few other people have said too, and that is the census. The census is going to be a big deal for us. And depending on, where the city population is, looking at, and this was really difficult. I was the only one, I guess I'm the only one who was here when we went through it last year or 10 years ago. And it is a really critical conversation that we need to partner with the city council with. And whether we, I know we have to balance our voting, districts, but it is a time for us to say, who do we all represent? We have these 7 precincts, 7 districts that 2 of them hold the majority of the students in our district. And I think that that's something that we need to look at always, as a balance. So the census is going to come in, dovetail into housing and enrollment. And it needs to be a conversation that is on our radar. And we need to be prepared to defend the boundaries that we want to set, because we'll set the boundaries and then present them to the city council, but the city council is the one who has the last say on what those boundaries look like. So that would be, along with everything else that we need to do, the census is going to be another conversation that we're going to have.
Those are important priorities, Christy. So what I'm hearing is the study sessions on the topics you've heard from other board members, including poverty and intergenerational poverty, and then a strong look at our advocacy role, particularly with the city, but in connection, obviously with the legislature, and increasing that role and voice. And then the census, partnering with the city council, looking at housing and enrollment as a result of that census.
That's going to be, and that's probably going to work into, our enrollment conversation and what that looks like. But I do also want to throw my support to the district goals that we've already set, which is literacy and SEL. I hope I said that.
Yeah,
I just took it off my list because everyone else was saying it.
You did, and I think I'll ask at the end of this conversation. We still have Catherine I want to hear from, but be thinking. I want to ask how board members feel about adding equity, excellence, and equity as a third board priority. So think about that, but listen to Catherine, because I know she's going to have thoughtful and creative ideas. Catherine?
Thanks, Melissa. It's been great to listen to this conversation. It's helped me focus some of the things I wanted to say. I think that excellence and equity is our vision, and I think it informs everything we do, and I don't want to add it as a specific goal. I think that we always focus towards excellence and equity as the way we look at everything we do, with our specific goals as social, emotional, and literacy, that we look at those towards, with an equity and excellence focus. And I think we need to talk about excellence along with equity more often, as those going hand in hand. That's my 2 cents about what you just asked. So I like what people have said. I really admire the way Sam addressed those things. I think I counted 9 things personally within his 3 focuses. So I was very impressed. And
it's a genius.
I support all 9 of his things. In fact, I think I just agree. So, so the things that I think fall into his looking, focused. I'm trying to think of what it was. I don't know if it was outward or what it was, which category it was, but I think that I'd like to look specifically at district, and maybe it also fit in some of the things that Nate was saying, but district enrollment patterns. I'd like to think about that. Maybe it was the way Nate was talking about equity. I really think that we could really do a lot by looking at district enrollment patterns and thinking about how we're addressing our students. I've thought a lot about one of the goals we set about 3 years ago when we had a big conference, a big meeting in the district ELP committee. We wanted to think about how we were serving all students within the district in terms of ELP services, and everyone in that room said that we wanted to serve students that were living on the west side more equitably. And I don't think we achieved that, even though we've talked about that for 3 years. And I think if we really looked carefully at the district and how our enrollment patterns are working, I think we could do that. And I don't think we necessarily need to do, big things. I don't think we needed to necessarily shift things or make major changes in our schools. I think people worried about that, and I'm not trying to say we need to do that, but I just want to make sure that we're doing that, and that we really looked at our enrollment patterns and how we were serving kids and what we were doing for our kids, and and just making sure that was happening. But it was interesting to me that everyone in that room from all sorts of schools, that was our focus, and that was clearly what people wanted to do. But it still seemed like it was hard for us to get there. And so I really think that if we did a big, made that a focus, that we could do that. And I did have some ideas. So speaking to Christy's goal of, trying to think about how we could do this and really putting together some plans, how could we do this? And I thought maybe we should put together a plan for doing that, and maybe even hiring some people. And I thought about the fact that we hired some people to put together a study for us to do late start and to survey the community. And, we have someone right down the street from me, between me and the district office. Pam Perlick runs the office for looking at, and I don't know, she's busy. I don't know if she'd be available, but she knows the city so well inside and out. And I wonder if she would look at our city and say, here's where your district is growing. Here's why it's growing. Here's how you could get it to grow. Here's where you have possibilities. Here's where your schools are serving your kids, and here's where you could maybe try to develop some more, get some more kids in, things like that. And, really ask whether she would be willing to do a study for us. And then the other thing is I was thinking maybe we could get someone to really think about our schools, someone who knows our schools well, and maybe someone that had looked at our schools recently. And some of you know that I'm, maybe who I'm talking about, and I can talk to you more about that. I'm not sure that I want to talk about that specifically in an open session in case the person isn't interested. I don't want to talk about him and an open session where that person might not be interested and might be on the tape. And I don't necessarily want to I don't call him out on this tape, but if he's not willing to do it, but maybe talk to those people about whether they are interested in working with our district, because I think we could probably pay less than what we paid the wonderful group that did an analysis for Late Start, and really get some good information. So to do what Christy is talking about and getting some specific information, maybe some specific plans for our district about enrollment patterns and how we could serve our city well with those plans, and really make some progress and do some thinking about, are we serving our ELP students? Are we serving our students with special needs? Are we serving our students with 504s? Really to have some people that know, someone that knows our district, someone that all of us thought would maybe be a good candidate for particular jobs, or with, that could maybe look at our schools and say, help our superintendent, who's going to be really busy with other things, but could look at our schools and say, we are serving our students that have 504s, really well at these schools, but maybe not so well at these schools, and really look at district enrollment patterns and things, and say, we had all of our students come back for COVID, in this enrollment or this district pattern, but not in this district, in this this enrollment pattern, and this may be why. So maybe take a really careful look at our district and think about those enrollment patterns and what's happening, and maybe they could do some of the things that we were thinking about in terms of we talked earlier, and I don't want to give specifics too, about employees at some of the schools and how some of the schools have certain employees and some of the schools have other employees, and some of the schools may lack different employees. But maybe talk about how that's working for us too, and say, well, this school has these employees and the school doesn't have these employees, and that's working well or that isn't working well. And so, maybe really take a careful look at that for us and talk about that for us. So I don't know. I'm trying to not be too specific, but I hope that board members are getting my drift. Is that right?
And I think you're talking about positions, right? You're not talking about specific people. You're saying schools
Yes.
who have.
Yes, I'm talking about specific positions, but I'm also talking about people to do these roles for us. And I am talking about Pam Perlick, and I do have a specific person in mind for the other position that knows our district. And I think many of you know who I'm talking about, I think, but I don't want to name that person because I don't know if that person's interested and I haven't talked to that person. And I don't want to put that person on the spot.
So let me make you want to look at enrollment patterns, and you potentially want to hire consultants to do that.
That's right. And I have ideas, and I'm not stuck on those people. And I don't want to put them on the spot. And I don't want to put us on the spot. And I haven't talked to anyone, obviously, but those are my ideas. Does that make sense?
Right.
And without board permission, of course, I haven't talked to any of those people.
Okay.
And so those would be my suggestions, because I do think that Christy is right, that often we have good ideas, but because we don't have a plan, we don't necessarily convert on those ideas, to use a football metaphor. I think you're very impressed, Melissa. Is that right? So yes. In any case, so that's
Thank you. Touchdown.
So, that's right. Thank you. So then that would be one of my priorities. Another priority would be to really put into place the late start plan this fall. And what's happened is that, with Superintendent Cunningham leaving, and also Jeremy Chatterton, who I call for various reasons Lord Chatterton, because he used to chase the birds off the south lawn of West High School, and in a very grand way when he was at West High School. But now, since he's been employed now to be Lord Chatterton at Highland High School, so he's now at the Highlands, which seems very appropriate. He may no longer have time to run the late start committee. So I'm wondering if Superintendent Madden would like to speak to him about that. And maybe we may need new leadership for that committee. I don't know whether he has time to do that or not. So I'd like to see that go forward quickly. I think what we'll find is that COVID's going to keep us busy. The superintendent search is going to keep us busy. That's a priority for me, as I've heard other people talk. I really want to get that started. I'm looking forward to seeing that take place. And I would like to have board members be involved with that. Maybe not be involved, but just keep our fingers on the pulse of that. I think of what I'd love to do is see us be a little bit more engaged. I think that the last leadership really like to have board members sort of, I don't know, at arm's length, with a very stiff arm. And I'd really love to have us I'd like to be quiet and be observant and not necessarily be participatory, but really be more involved and be listening and be more engaged, so I know what's happening. For example, I didn't know what was happening at all with any of these committees, and I wish I had more knowledge because I've been asked a lot of questions, and I think good things were happening. I would have felt more confident. I feel confident in our people, but I'd like to be more engaged. So I'd love to be involved with committees, to know what's happening more. I know that there can only be 3 of us involved at a time, but I'd really love to see us be more involved when we can be. That's just a little side piece. So, for example, I'd love to have those of us who are interested in late start be involved with late start or take turns attending things. I think if lots of us are interested, I think we could take turns with things on different sets of things, or rotate, whatever works. The last thing that I've wanted to do since I've been a board member, and I think there may be more interest with this board than there was a couple of years ago, is the arts. And the arts are an equity issue. I think we found that when we did a book reading. I'd love to do another book group, and I'd love to do Michelle's book if we're interested in that. I thought that our book club that we did a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, was very productive. It was a wonderful experience, I felt like. One of the things we learned from that book reading is that the arts are an equity issue, and that students that are low income really don't have arts experiences, and that's one of the things that we can bring to students that is really something that does equalize and makes school experiences much more equitable. And it's one of the only ways that low income students do get experiences with the arts. And we are really, in some ways, not doing a great job. In some ways, we're doing a marvelous job, but in some ways, we're not doing a great job with the arts. And I would really like us to take a careful look and see where we're not doing a good job with the arts and where we can do a better job with the arts in our district. And examine that and think about what we're doing and what we're not doing. And you know, I don't mean to say that, because we have got so many teachers in our district that are so marvelous and do so much and really give so much of themselves. So I don't mean to decry any of our arts teachers, but you know, how can we do a little bit more, and how can we give our kids a little bit more, and you know, what can we do to give them those experiences, and our kids that are low income, you know, what can we do to make sure that they have those experiences? And you know, earlier I said today, you know, let's double block reading. And how can we do that but not take away their electives, so they still have those experiences with the arts, so they're not taken away from things that they love? Because I don't want to do that. I don't want that to happen. If a kid needs more reading, let's not take that away from their experiences with what they love, you know, that kind of thing. So I'd really like to focus with the arts. And now I'm saying that, and I would like to maybe develop a real plan for them to have arts, and think about where we're not strong in the arts. And I think that there are some gaps at each of our high schools, at least. What can we do to fill those gaps? I'd really like to see us have, you know, district level arts programs. We've been talking about that for a couple of years, district level arts programs. And this is a hard year to maybe get that started, but what can we do to see that happen? And is there anything innovative we can do this year? Anything online that we can do that really innovative this year to get that started, and to do something exciting this year to engage these kids that feel a little hopeless this year? Those would be my 3 things.
Thank you, Catherine.
And I did have 3.
You did have 3 with a million parts. So
I'm the only person who had 9,
so
so I apologize.
They were awesome. I agreed with every single one of them.
Well, I don't want to stop the conversation. I've really learned a lot from you, and I just feel our district is in good hands. You guys are a great board, good, thoughtful people. I hope it's been a useful exercise for you to think about the things that are the most important to you, and then hear that what we're talking about as a board is pretty unified. Really, we want to do well by our students. We want to make sure they're reading. We want to make sure they're emotionally healthy, socially healthy. We want to make sure we're looking at things with an equity lens on everything we do. I might push back just a little and say I would like to add equity as a priority in terms of how we're measuring things. So yes, we do try and look at everything with an equity lens, but I would like to make sure that that measurement piece, so that we're making progress toward it in the way we're trying to measure literacy, and you know, with more difficulty trying to measure social and emotional learning. I do think it's important that we're paying attention to how those gaps are being filled, and how we're addressing that on a regular basis. So even if it isn't listed as a separate priority, because you're right, Catherine, it needs to be a part of everything, I do want to make sure we're measuring it and focusing on that measurement so that we're making forward progress. It can be something we talk about, but if we're not measuring it, we're not taking deliberate steps toward it, I think it might be hard to know if we've made progress. And we need to make progress. We absolutely do. This is a lot. I mean, I hope you recognize that this is a lot for us to tackle. I don't think it's unmanageable, though. I think we can do it. What I'd like to do, if you're okay with that, this is put this together as a list of the things that we've prioritized and send it out to you for your review so that you can make sure that I've captured everything. And then I will work with Larry and Nate to make sure that we're addressing these topics through the year. I hope that you will give us just a little bit of grace time to get started on that as we focus really in the next 6 weeks on reopening schools. Is that fair, Nate?
Yeah, and I'm wondering how the board might feel, just and you as well, Alan and Melissa, just for a little structure. In my notes, I felt like there was about 5 very specific kind of umbrella things, right? And priorities, how we want to name those. But I really feel like a lot of the lists, the things that are that you all listed relative to your priorities kind of fit under 5 headers of equity, enrollment, advocacy, our existing goals and priorities, and then commitments that we've already made, specifically late start and sustainability. I see a lot of connectivity just looking at this relative to the city and how that plays into advocacy. I see a lot of connectivity relative to enrollment and our work with the city. I know Dr. Perlich is very engaged with the city and has a very specific MOU with the city to do demographic work, right? So there might be some potential of us either partnering with the city and to, your point, Christy, as far as advocacy and how that goes. And maybe we loop ourselves into to some of that discussion. I know it's Melissa's and mine's goal once we get things a little more settled after this meeting in particular, now that we have some really solid direction to engage the mayor's office and the city council. I know we should probably start thinking about how we continue our quarterly meetings with the state legislators. So I think there's a lot of potential here to really focus on what I'm calling kind of 5 specific headers, and wondering how y'all might feel if Melissa and I and Larry kind of put that framework based on all of your responses into those headers.
Can you say your 5 headers again? I'm sorry, I got 4 of them, but I didn't get the 5th one.
Certainly. So it's equity, enrollment, advocacy, existing goals and priorities. So that would be like SEL and literacy. And then our already existing commitments of late start and our sustainability work. Though, I don't know, I just felt like in my notes, I felt like everything that we've been discussing could fit under those things. And especially when you think about the relationship to the city and that advocacy piece, to Christy's point, I think there's a lot of things that the city and the school district could be advocating for collectively, especially in the realm of things like housing, RDA. I would like to throw out that I do want to engage in conversations about our relationship with the police department, but would want to couch that again with some more advocacy work and some things that are already in the works relative to the city and Mayor Mendenhall's and the city council's commitment to a policing commission, which, I believe that the school district, whether it's an advocate of some kind, should be participating in that, right? And re-examining the MOU that we put into place last year, following back up with Representative Hollins and other community leaders who helped put together the framework of implicit bias training, right? So I think there's a lot that can be studied in a collective way relative to that advocacy point that Christy brought up. So I was just throwing that out there as a suggestion that might help us, strategically, map this out throughout the year in a more efficient way.
I like that idea.
What we do is maybe take that piece plus all of my notes and put it together and send it out to you for your review, right? And maybe we bring that back for you, for us to talk about again, at least in a short sort of a shortened way next meeting, just to approve that sort of framework that we would be looking at, topics that we would be addressing next year. If that works. Okay. I see a couple thumbs up. So no decisions yet. Obviously, this is something that we will just take this conversation, which has been great, and try and synthesize it and give it back to you in a form that then you can approve of. Okay. Thank you. So we'll continue that conversation. And the last thing on our discussion agenda is the board meeting schedule. You've heard me say what you've got attached is just the current schedule for the 2020-2021 school year. I would like to add a meeting in July. I've suggested July 21st because that's Tuesday, 2 weeks from today, and before August 1st, which is when we have to have those assurances. So I will open the conversation to see if July 21st for a board meeting would work for you. And we'll see how that goes. Go ahead. Michelle, do you want to start and let us know where you're at with that?
So, and would this be in the evening?
Sorry, say that again.
Would this be in the evening? The
Yes.
meeting? Yeah,
we can set it when we want, but typically we've done those regular meetings in the evening. Go ahead, Larry.
You could consider the 28th too. I mean, I think
Right.
this looks like it might be a relatively short meeting, and so we do have one more Tuesday in there if we want to keep it on Tuesday.
True that. So I was just suggesting the 21st because that's 2 weeks from today, but you're right, the 28th. So let's talk about it. Michelle, do either of those days work for you?
Yeah, I can do either or. As long as it's in the evening, I'll be fine.
Okay, so July 21st and or the 28th work for you. Mike, do either of those days work for you?
I'm retired. I'm good.
You are good. So either day works for you.
Yep.
Okay. Catherine?
I have a conflict on the 21st, but I'm okay on the 28th.
Okay. Nate?
Both dates work for me as long as they're after 4:30 start time.
Okay. We'll try and not do an 8-hour meeting. Larry says it's going to be light, so we'll just do at least 50% of this meeting.
Well, what you say, Larry.
I could suck those words back in as soon as they came out of my mouth.
We've been together too long. I'm starting to get punchy. I'm sorry. Sam, would do 21st or 28th work for you?
Either one works for me, yeah.
Okay. Christy?
Right now, either day works for me. I just always get a little concerned when we have those back-to-back meetings, because that would really only be a week in between those two meetings. And trying to get the agenda out and us be prepared, and especially where it's a tax hearing, that possibility. So it sounds like Catherine has a conflict with the 21st, that she wouldn't be able to come on the 20th. Is that right, Catherine? You wouldn't be able to come at all on the 21st?
I'm just checking to see. My daughter has a meeting that night that I need to go to her with. It is electronic, and I'm just finding out it's 6 to 8. So I'm available before 6 and after 8.
Okay. And Alan, will you clarify? I don't think we need to use that August meeting as a tax hearing.
Oh yeah, that's right, because we're not doing that.
Right.
So.
Right, but your point is still well taken, Christy. A week between meetings is difficult. So do we dare say we could meet at 5 on the 21st and be done by 6? Do we dare say that? No.
I think that if you have what's the agenda? What do we need to have on the agenda?
We need to have the assurances. We have to have that. The assurances for the restart. To give to USBE. And
So
we
if
need
we
to
all-
have we need to have our RFP, which probably can go on consent.
Yeah.
And we will have a framework or a plan for our discussion based on the conversation we just had with our priorities, which can maybe be a consent kind of thing as well. Is there anything else, Superintendent? We may have a couple other business sort of items that we need to look at. Well, we'll probably want to approve negotiations as well. We'll hope to have those complete by then. But that might potentially be a quick, hopefully kind of consent sort of thing as well.
Seems like they could all potentially be quick. And we'll get the assurances, you'll have them before the meeting. We'll get those out to you just as soon as we can.
So we'll be ready to
You'll have seen
approve.
them, you'll know where that's at well before we sit down that day.
We don't have to stick with a Tuesday. It's just been our practice, and so that's kind of what we're familiar with as far as timing and getting things out to you. And our people who are paying attention to our meetings and attending are used to Tuesday. So you tell me, we could meet at 8, Catherine, on the 21st.
I mean, if Nate thinks he'll be done at 4:30 and it's virtual, we can do 4:30 to 6. If I need to leave, I can leave.
And Michelle needs evening too, though.
She does, okay.
Oh, 4:30 is fine with me. Anything after 4 for me is fine.
And looking at my schedule, I could move the meeting that I have on the 21st so that I could be there by 4. I can make that commitment.
So do you think we can do this between 4 and 6? I think we probably can. Okay, yay! So we need to move to that to action, and I would take a motion that we move the schedule to action with an additional board meeting July 21st from 4 to 6 p.m.
I move that we move the schedule to action with a board meeting from 4 to 6 p.m.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay, so Catherine's we're moving to action. Catherine's moved it to action. Michelle. Second, let's go ahead and vote for that.
Michelle Tuichpo, yes.
Mike Malka, yes.
Catherine Kennedy, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Samuel Hansen, yes.
Melissa Ford, yes.
Sorry, Christy Sweat, yes.
All right, thank you. Okay, so that's everything on our discussion.
Melissa,
Yes, go ahead, Mike.
can I ask the superintendent a question before we go forward?
Yes, of course.
Real quick question. Has there been any discussion about the after-school program?
There's been some discussion about the after-school program and even kind of a beginning conversation with the city. So I don't have any answers for you, any details on that, but yeah, those are conversations, yes.
Okay, good, because that's a lot of the people that talk with me and how they're worried about it down here.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike. I think that's on everybody's minds. So thanks for bringing that up. Thanks for having those conversations, Superintendent. We have, if I'm paying attention, and I think I am, 2 items on our action agenda. So the first would be the contracts for interim superintendent and business administrator.
I can just go through that really quick, Melissa.
Absolutely.
So I had to number the pages in the contracts. So that's how I'll refer it to all of you. So let's start
Okay.
with the interim superintendent first, Larry's.
Okay.
So on page 1, under 2B3, it says her.
Ha, you're right.
Yeah, her supervision. Then we're going to move to page 2. And under C, there's multiple his and he in that paragraph. So it says devotes his time on his own time, he may serve. So all of that can be changed, you know, and have those pronouns be taken out. So it's under
How would you
activities.
how would you want them? How would you want it
Well,
to
I
be?
think it's
And I
easy to say
asked
the
Larry.
interim superintendent shall devote time, attention, and energy. It doesn't need to say his, it can just
Okay.
say time, attention, and energy. So it's easy to read through, you know, by just taking those pronouns out.
Okay.
The same way under professional growth and interim superintendent, it's again, it says interim superintendent through his participation as he might. So there's just two more places there.
And I know that we've made a priority for our policies to take pronouns
Yes.
out. And so that I take your point, Christy. I also know that this contract is specific to somebody who uses him, he, his as pronouns.
Right. If
So
you
that's why
remember
I wasn't.
our past conversation, you know, Nate and I pointed out that, you know, let's make this a practice where we don't use pronouns, you know, and so that was the reason why
Okay.
anyway, if everybody else doesn't care, then maybe Nate, I don't know, Nate, I'm not going to speak for you now, but it was what you and I had talked about.
Yeah, I don't know. I know we've had a number of discussions, and certainly when I first started on the board, and when Sam joined us as well, too long after. I think it's more in line with solidarity to the gender diversity that we have in our community, in our district, and our student body and employees. I think is really where the foundation of you know, moving our policies and contracts away from you know, binary gender pronouns, he, him, she, hers, and really just keeping those to either no pronouns or they, them. It's not necessarily a reflection on how Larry or Alan might identify relative to their gender, but more along the lines of setting the tone from the top relative to advocacy and solidarity with the community that does not identify within those binaries.
You said that much better than I did, Nate.
So thank you for that. And if I get a thumbs up from the board, that's what I'll do, is I'll just go through and remove all pronouns.
Go through it,
I
Melissa.
started doing that. I did start doing that and then left them because I was, you know, kind of.
Yeah, there's some on page 3. There's another her that's underneath disability, and then another one on page 4. So if you go through it, that's great. And then another one on the last page.
Okay.
The one that's in Alan's, again, he's got the pronouns in his also.
I'll go through and make all those
Look at the
changes.
evaluation piece that's on page 3 of his contract. I just want it to be cohesive because it says the board and superintendent shall evaluate. The board and superintendent shall evaluate and assess the performance of the business administrator in closed session at least once a year during the term of this contract. Those in attendance in the closed session during this evaluation will be at the discretion of the board, the business administrator, and members of the board. The superintendent should also be in that line. Because we're saying it in the above paragraph. And so the superintendent should just be included in that line of who is in that session. And that's it.
Okay. I can make those changes, assuming Larry and Alan, you're comfortable with those changes. I'll make those, have you sign them. Board, you're comfortable with those changes. I'm kind of seeing nods of heads, but a thumbs up would be helpful. Okay, I'll go through and take out all pronouns, add superintendent to that evaluation piece, and we'll then get it signed.
Okay, so with that, if you make those changes, then I move that we accept the contracts for the interim superintendent, Larry Madden, and the business administrator, Alan Kersley.
Second.
Okay, so I've got a motion by Christy that we accept the contracts pending the changes that I will make, that we've spoken about, taking out all pronouns and then adding superintendent to the evaluation number 4 evaluation section of the business administrator contract. I have a motion by Christy, second by Catherine. Let's go ahead and vote for these contracts.
Michelle Tuichpo, yes.
Mike Namalka, yes.
Catherine Kennedy, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Samuel Hansen, yes.
Melissa Ford, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
All right, thank you all. And then the next item on our action agenda is the calendar. And it's the, so I will take a motion about the adding to accept the calendar with an additional meeting on July 21st at 4 p.m.
I move that we accept the board meeting schedule with an additional meeting on July 21st from 4 to 6.
Second,
Second the motion.
I have a motion by Catherine and a second by Sam. Let's go ahead and vote.
Michelle Tuichpo, yes.
Mike Namalka, yes.
Catherine Kennedy, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Samuel Hansen, yes.
Melissa Ford, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Okay, so that motion passes. We have an additional meeting in July. Nate?
Yeah, real quick, and I'm sorry, my brain's a little jumbled with the long meeting, so excuse me. But did we, with the RFP, did we just move that to action, or did we approve that?
No, we moved it to
Okay.
action.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Oh, for sure. Do you mind if I make a motion on that, Melissa?
That would be awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I would like to make a motion that we approve the RFP process and timeline and work to get that out on the schedule at the end of July.
Second.
Any discussion on that? Okay, let's vote.
Michelle Tuichpo, yes.
Mike Namalka, yes.
Catherine Kennedy, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Samuel Hansen, yes.
Melissa Ford, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Nate. And that, I think that concludes our action agenda. Superintendent?
Was there a vote, or did there need to be a vote on support of the template for reopening?
No, what you heard us all give you support consensus to move forward with that.
Okay.
If you would like us to move that from discussion to action and want it so that it's a vote, we can do that, but
I'm comfortable.
you heard support to move forward. Okay. Especially because what you heard is we're not approving it exactly as it is. What we're saying is take it forward from the point we've seen it and be flexible with it and address the issues you need.
Okay.
And you heard consensus support for that. Thank you for that. So now moving to F on our agenda is the board member report. So let's go ahead. Do we have reports from board members? We'll start with you, Christy. Do you have something you'd like to contribute from the board member report? Okay. Sam? Anything?
No, I'm okay. I waived my report.
Okay, I'm going to speak for an hour at least, so just get ready. Nate, do you have something for your board member report?
You know, nothing specific other than just a huge, show of gratitude to all of the district employees and administrators who participated today and put together a lot of thoughtful reports. I know just, looking at all of the information and trying to prepare myself for the board meeting today, a lot of work has gone into that. So I just wanted to extend that and also extend my thanks to our board and colleagues, Larry and Alan, Moselle and Tyler, who really this meeting today. And I think we've gotten a lot accomplished and really identified some very specific things that'll benefit our community and our students moving forward. So I just extend that gratitude to each and every one of you.
Thank you, Nate. I think you're right about that. We've got some pretty clear direction for the next year and lots of work in front of us, and I appreciate that. Catherine, do you have something you want to add?
Yeah, I'll second what Nate said and thank the negotiations team, Alan and Larry and Moselle and Tyler and the three board members that have really done a yeoman-like, I don't know if yeoman is a PC term anymore, but really yeoman-like effort to bring us to the point that we're at. I really appreciate your work. I also just wanted to mention that I appreciated the process that went forward to get the information we had about the teams in our district that did test COVID positive. I thought that that reporting system went well. And I think that it was I who asked for that information. And I would like to ask for that again. And I think that Superintendent Madden does know about that. And I just want to say that I would like to ask for that again formally. And just say that I really feel like we do need to get that information. We do need to make sure that our athletes know, that our families of our athletes know, and that our coaches know, and that our principals know, and our athletic directors know, and that they all need to report up immediately when there is any COVID positive information. And that information needs to be relayed to the superintendent, who will relay it to us. I would like to see that information. I'd like to see a formal reporting process happen. I'd like to see UHSAA have a formal reporting process. Maybe the county have a formal reporting process. I really feel that sports will be a problem, that our sports teams will end up passing this back and forth to each other, and that will be a vector, and that we're going to see that be a problem. And I just want us to make sure that we're really on top of that. And I'm very, very concerned about that being an issue. I just want to make sure that we know immediately when our teams have COVID, and that we know immediately, and that we really are just immediately aware of any situations that are happening. And I don't think right now.
Thanks for that, Catherine.
I don't think it's only football. I think that all of our teams are practicing right now. Our basketball teams are practicing inside. Volleyball teams are practicing inside. And I just think we just really need to know immediately.
Okay, so I will take that. I think there is a reporting process, and I'll
just want to make sure that
make sure it's reported to the board, and we can talk about that.
Very formal.
Okay. There is a formal process, but we'll talk about that, and maybe that's something that we can send out to the board before our next meeting, and potentially add that to our next meeting, but still keep it under 2 hours. So I want to. I think I am sensitive to that, Catherine. I know you've asked for that, and I know that there's good work happening on that.
Sam may want to chime in too.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to go out of order, but I did want to add something to what Catherine said. So,
go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to, if people are listening still on Facebook, and for the rest of the board, UHSAA is meeting on the 9th of July, and what I heard from Laura Belknap, who's on the state board and also on the board of directors of UHSAA, is that they will be working to decide how to proceed with a season for various sports if we get to the point in the fall where everyone's in yellow across the state. So if you're concerned, as Catherine and I have expressed ourselves about this issue, I encourage you to write to them, because they are trying to figure out their response right now. And I think it would be good for them to hear from people in the city who have a different perspective.
Okay.
Melissa, can I just add one thing to what Sam just said, is that, remember, we have a representative that sits on that board that represents Salt Lake District, and it's Belinda,
and I know Sam's reached out to Belinda.
Yeah, and Belinda is great. And I think that if there's, something that we want her to, speak up at that table for us, then that should be something that collectively, we come together and we do that together, so that she can, that's what she's there for, is to represent Salt Lake District.
And she's been very responsive to me. She's going to talk to me on the 9th after the meeting as well. So,
well, and at the risk of getting into a discussion on this, I will say that I'm concerned that they're going to make a decision that leaves Salt Lake out, that they'll go ahead and approve competitions, but not include us. And I'm concerned about that. So I think that would be a hard pill to swallow for our kids and our coaches, and we'll have to figure out how to represent them in that conversation as well. Mike, did you have something you wanted to add?
I want to make Nate's day.
Okay, do it.
Nate, I believe I have come up with a solution to Benyon Elementary. I will put together something for the board in the next couple of board meetings and let them look at it. And maybe we won't have to close Benyon, Nate. We can keep it open.
Mike,
Mike, I love it. Will
Yeah.
you solve all my problems too?
Nope, just Nate's. Benyon.
yeah, Melissa,
Nate
stay out of
today,
this.
right? All right.
Mike, Mike, I
My
do
turn
know you-
next meeting. Thank you, Mike. I will look forward to that. Yeah, I look forward to that. Thank you. So I will send you some information after this meeting. Nate and I will look with Superintendent Madden and Business Administrator Kersley will look at the agenda priorities. I also have an email which I'll send to you with a request from the West High administration asking us to look at rebuilding West, which I will send to all of you. I would also like to get your support perhaps in having board leadership and our RDA rep, who's Christy, in setting up a meeting with the mayor and city council. We've done that in the past. I'd like to just make sure I'm doing that with your approval to set up a meeting with that group. And I'll ask for your feedback on that. And then mostly I just want to say thank you for spending 7.5 hours with me today. I've learned a lot from you. I think we have a lot of work to do. I appreciate the work that was presented from district administrators today, but I also know that there were a lot of people working behind the scenes to create that work and contributing, and that's going to continue. So I think we as a board need to make sure we are doing everything we can always to respect that work and acknowledge the difficulty and the many moving parts that they're trying to bring together. This is a difficult situation. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but our message, I believe, always needs to be one of gratitude and support for that work. And I know I feel it. I know you do too. So with that, I'm going to turn the time to our superintendent, who's.
What about Michelle?
Michelle, go ahead. Michelle, you're up.
No, I'm good actually. I don't have anything.
Thanks, Mike, and sorry, Michelle. I was losing track as I was getting long-winded. So Michelle, thank you. And I guess I did want to say also, if you guys are thinking about things, I started yesterday a challenge with the YWCA recommendation of the East High student government. It's pretty cool, and if you're thinking about maybe join with me, it's a 21-day challenge on racial equity and social justice. Pretty cool. You could spend 5 minutes a day or up to an hour a day going through it. It's been started yesterday, so you're not too late, but it's a good thing. And Michelle, your book made me think of that. I'm going to put that on my summer light reading list as well. So thank you for that. And Superintendent, thank you for everything you've put together for today. And I just want to say thank you for this first meeting. Here's a long one to kick off your year with us. But I want to give you the last word. So go ahead.
Okay, well, I just wanted to say thanks to all of you for your dedication and work, the amount of time and effort you put in for the families and staff and students in this district. It's really unbelievable and admirable. And I was really kind of thinking all those thoughts before you went over your priorities. And then after you went over your priorities, it just kind of kicked it up another level, because I think your priorities are, everything you said is just so spot on for the kinds of things that we need to focus on in this district, and the unwavering focus on getting better. Thanks to all of you. That's really all I wanted to say.
Well, thank you. Well done, everyone. It is 5:25. We're 25 minutes over schedule, but I think we got a lot accomplished today. I will call the meeting adjourned. You're amenable to that. Thank you, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Feel free to reach out at any time. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
Thanks.